are there like millions of psychopaths that are just walking about day to day that will never commit big crimes, or will they all sort of eventually go on to commit crimes?
No, it's the first of the two. Absolutely, there's loads of psychopaths. In fact, I'd probably say there's more psychopaths that either haven't committed crime or are under the radar of the police. There's more of those than there are psychopaths in prison.
You hear like psychopaths are often portrayed in film a lot, aren't they? Like in The Shining, you've got Jack Nicholson's character, you've got Leonardo DiCaprio in Shutter Island, Joaquin Phoenix we were speaking about in Joker. For you, because you brought up Saltburn there, which film do you think has like really nailed it for you when it comes to like mental illness portrayal?
So do you mean psychopaths specifically, or do you mean mental illness in general?
Whatever way you want to tackle that, really.
I suppose the one thing I would say is that people misunderstand psychopaths all the time, right? In fact, you asked me what my pet peeves, one I forgot to mention is as a mental health YouTuber is seeing people getting it wrong on YouTube, and they call people psychopaths in films incorrectly. It's far more often than they get it correctly.
Right.
So specifically, a psychopath is not necessarily somebody who is violent. It is somebody who it's more about being charming and manipulative. If violence helps your cause because you're a thug or a drug dealer, then that's what psychopath will do. But it doesn't have to be. A psychopath is more about somebody who manages to, as I said before, slip under the radar, pretend that they're normal on the outside, but will stab their best friends in the back to get a promotion. So they don't have any empathy for anybody, including people that they're supposedly close to, including their spouses, including their kids. So to answer your question, a good depiction of that would be this guy from Saltburn, because you don't know that there's anything wrong with him on the outside.
Yeah, no one else could see it. As viewers, we could, but yeah.
And I suppose, this is a bit of a cop-out because it's a very similar film, but just one that pops to my mind is Talented Mr. Ripley. That's a perfect example of somebody that's using his surroundings and the people around him and lying and manipulating and pretending he's something that he's not. That's what a true psychopath is. Right,
and I guess a misconception that I probably hold about psychopaths is that, to echo what you said, like, aggressive, wild, and eventually end up in prison. But are there like millions of psychopaths that are just walking about day to day that will never commit big crimes, or will they all sort of eventually go on to commit crimes?
No, it's the first of the two. Absolutely, there's loads of psychopaths. In fact, I'd probably say there's more psychopaths that either haven't committed crime or are under the radar of the police. There's more of those than there are psychopaths in prison, right? So about 1% of the population is psychopaths. So I suppose that means technically there's what's the population in the UK?
It's about 70 mil now, isn't it?
So whatever 1% of that.
700k.
Yeah. But I suppose some of them are kids, aren't they? So they'd have to be adults. So maybe sort of 300 odd. 300,000 odd.
So when you say people wrongly call people psychopaths, is that where people, I hear a lot of people either going, well, they're either a psychopath or a sociopath.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between those two things?
Yeah, I'll explain that. Just before, I just want to say something quickly. You probably know this, but psychopaths are massively overrepresented in the corporate world, right? And the reason they're so successful, the reason why they rise to CEO level, is because they will do anything for promotion. They will, lie to or about their colleagues. They will stab anybody in the back, so they can actually thrive in that kind of world. You get psychopaths that do jobs where a lack of a fear response is helpful. So first responders, surgeons are overrepresented with psychopathy. So
would Jeff Bezos, is there a likelihood that he'll be a psychopath?
I don't know enough about him and the way he treats people. The one that comes to mind is Steve Jobs. Possibly could be a psychopath because he was like pretty horrible to other people, and he would do whatever it took to meet deadlines and to treat his workers like shit. So I'm not saying he's definitely a psychopath, especially because he's dead.
Yeah,
but he definitely has some of the traits. Yeah, I don't know enough about Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, you hear similar stories. How true they are, I don't know. But there's there's the stories that like Amazon workers have to they wasn't there like a
peeing in the bottles
because they're not allowed toilet breaks. Like,
and was that his doing or was that the middle?
I think it's filtered through from him. Like, I think there was the famous story, again, not sure if it's true, but there's a famous story of a pregnant woman who was told she wasn't allowed to go because her waters had broke and she gave birth in the Amazon warehouse and stuff. So I don't know.
So I suppose if he knew that and he allowed it to happen, then that's definitely somebody indicative of traits of psychopathy.
Right.
Yeah. I only know it from, is it Jesse Eisenberg's portrayal in The Social Network? But Zuckerberg, how you've been explaining it, comes across as a psychopath in that film. Would you say he has those tendencies? Because he seems to just
he
be
seems it
jumping
in the
on top.
film.
Yeah, obviously we're only seeing an acted version of
Yeah.
it, but the everything he did to his business partner and everything is out there, isn't it? He won money off him and whatnot. So if that is to be believed, surely he's showing those tendencies.
I also don't want to get sued by Mark Zuckerberg. So, just for the camera, these guys put me up to it.
And like we said earlier, one of my favourite films is Joker,
Yeah.
the Joaquin Phoenix portrayal. And I had to Google this, I'll be honest, but he has it's a disease apparently. Is that-
Pseudobulbar palsy.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we see with him doing the sort of uncontrollable laughing.
Yeah.
How common is that?
It's very rare. So I've only ever seen it once in my career, and it wasn't the reason that somebody was in our psychiatry unit. They had like tics and OCD, but they happened to have it as a comorbid disease. So just by coincidence, they had this. So it's very, very rare. So do you want me to give you my 2-minute sort of summary on the psychoanalysis of?
Yeah, please.
So I've done a video on this on my YouTube channel, which is why I kind of know about it. It's that I would argue that it's not, even though despite how it's portrayed, it's not mental illness that drives Arthur Fleck to become Joker. It's everything else surrounding that, right? So he's got this pseudobulbar affect palsy, it's called. So he laughs uncontrollably. So that leads him to being beaten up. It leads him to being mocked. There's so many things on the outside that are happening to him. He just goes through a series of traumatic events. I'm sure you know it all, from being like beaten up and mugged by kids to losing his job, on the background of having a severe head injury. So I think that's really relevant because, as you might know, people with severe head injuries can become quite disinhibited. They become quite aggressive if it's in a certain part of the brain. Plus, he experienced abuse himself from his stepfather, possibly from his mother. Then all these other events come in. So he has an identity crisis, thinking he's what's Bruce Wayne's dad's called?
Bruce Wayne's dad?
I think Thomas. It's Thomas
thought
Wayne,
of
isn't it?
Martha, but Thomas.
Thomas, he thinks it's Thomas Wayne's son, and then he gets kind of disowned by him. So I think it's layer upon layer of all of these traumas that makes him finally snap. He feels like he's nobody. He feels like the world isn't taking him seriously, and then he kills these people on the train. And for the first time ever, he gets like respect from the community, and he kind of stands up for himself, and he realizes that the only way that the world will pay attention to him and stop being ignored is by being this sort of maniacal beast. So in summary, it's not, I don't think, mental illness that causes him to become the Joker. I think it's a couple of neurological diseases. So the pseudobulbar palsy thing is a neurology. It's to do with your nerves rather than your emotions. So it's neurology rather than
Oh, right.
psychiatry. Head injury and all of these events made him this kind of supervillain, not mental illness. That's what I think.
Wow, what an analysis. I can see why you do it for a job. You're pretty good at it.
He's done this before.
Yeah, he's done this before. How accurate? You said you met one person that was suffering with this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How accurate was Joaquin's performance of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think his entire performance throughout the film was exceptional. It was pretty accurate. This person that I remember was in a secure unit and would laugh fairly maniacally. Probably not as often as Joaquin was doing it once in a while. It's not too dissimilar to Tourette's. It's kind of like a tic that you can't control, but it's just laughter rather than a swear word.
What is the and this might not be something you know, but with Tourette's, what's going on there? What's the science behind that?
Yeah, I don't know too much, to be honest
Right.
with you. I know there's like certain prefrontal cortex, it's called, there's certain aspects of the brain that kind of wired wrongly.
Fair play.
Another film that gets a lot of props for the acting from the audience is James McAvoy in Split.
I've seen that.
Have you not seen it? So all over the internet, like people tend to think he's incredible in it. So I think he's schizophrenic in that film. He's got multiple personality disorder.
No, he has split personality.
But he's got quite a few different.
He has 23 different personalities, and they're 23 different alter egos, aren't they?
Yeah. So I would have been intrigued. It would be cool for you to watch it because, as a viewer, he's very good at playing the different personalities. But I'm intrigued to know whether he's good at doing the mental illness side of it. Obviously, we're just seeing all these personalities, but whether that's a true portrayal of it is hard for us to judge.
So I can answer that to a degree. So I've seen like the trailer, so I know the premise of the film, and I know that he does, as you say, sort of jump between these characters. The one thing that I would say is that dissociative identity disorder is the technical term for multiple personality disorder, is extremely rare, and I've never seen personally a credible case of it myself, but I've seen several people who've tried to fake it. So probably about 5 or 10. Well, probably closer to 10 people over my career that have tried to fake it. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because I think that would be a bit arrogant of me, but I'm saying that I'm very skeptical about most of its presentation.
Right.
And it tends to happen to people who have had horrific, repeated trauma and abuse. So unless you've got that in your background, it's almost impossible to have that disorder, which is one of the reasons that I'm skeptical about the patients that I've seen, because they've had some form of abuse, but not to that degree.
How do you say to someone you're lying? Like about, like, if are they going as simple as just going hello and then suddenly they're going, this is John now? Like, is that what they're trying to do because I've seen it in a film?
This might interest you. So there is I'm trying to remember the name now. Kenneth, I'm sure his name is Kenneth Bianchi. He was a serial killer in California in, I believe, the 70s, if you're able to look that up.
Yeah, got it here. Kenneth Bianchi, yeah, born 1951.
Serial killer, kidnapper, and rapist.
Yeah, span of crimes, 1977 to
He had a
1979.
nickname, something Hills Murderer or something.
Other names, the Hillside Strangler,
That's one, right.
and
So-
Kennifer.
Okay, so this is a perfect example of somebody faking it. So I'm trying to remember all the details now. So he was a serial killer, and it turned out that it wasn't just him. It's him and his cousin, I believe, that were going around killing all these women in California in the 70s. And he tried to fake multiple personality disorder, and he basically got caught out by a clever psychologist who kind of just basically tricked him by saying certain things like, there's no such thing as having two personalities. It has to be a minimum of 3 for the diagnosis to work, which is bullshit. And then suddenly this third person.
Oh, no.
Stuff like that. And then the psychologist said, you should, if you've got this disorder, you should be able to remember these details, but not these details.
So he just kept saying it, and then he's suddenly making up all these extra things.
So he wrote in his report, this guy's like this.
Oh, wow.
Wow. But there's never been a confirmed case of somebody definitely having split personality.
Not that I mean, I should answer that by saying I think there has been, but I'm not fully convinced how. I would need to see it myself to be fully convinced. I'm like an agnostic.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah, I think I only know it from films. Like Psycho's the same, isn't it? Psycho, because he dresses up as his mum and then kills people when he's dressed as his mum.
Yeah.
So that's is that why he's called? I don't know the original Psycho.
Right.
I know I've seen the Vince Vaughn one, which is a weird version of it. But and then is that why he was called Kennifer? Because his other personality was maybe called Jennifer.
Oh.
I guess that was why his nickname was that.
Right.
So I'll just quickly say this. In the cases that I've seen hundreds, possibly even thousands of cases where somebody's psychotic. So they have like a paranoid belief that's incorrect, and that's why they've attacked somebody. I've seen that loads of times, but I've never credibly seen somebody that's completely switched from one personality and doesn't have any of the thoughts, emotions, or memories of another personality. I've never seen that.
Right.